How a project professional, a PMP, can transition into value stream management. Today's topic, and I am Joshua Barnes, joined by Krystal Brady. And in this episode of All Things Discipline Agile, we'll give you some insight into an actual project professional who's made that transition and is leading a lot of the value stream flow improvements at her organization. So Krystal Brady, she is a director of the digital experience at ASCO, which is the American Society of Clinical Oncology. She is a project professional with the designation of being a PMP, along with really great Agile experience and some of the DA certifications, Discipline Agile Senior Scrum Master, and sort of the crown jewel in the DA certifications, which is the Discipline Agile Value Stream Consultant. One other thing that I'm really happy to share is that Krystal is going to be a presenter at PMI's Global Summit in a couple of weeks. So it's a really high achievement to be selected to speak at such a conference. And I'm actually just thrilled to have you here presenting this topic for us today.
Thank you. It's really great to be here with you guys. I'm excited about our conversation today.
So Krystal, what can you tell us about this topic, right? How you in your experience, transitioned into having a focus on the value delivered to a customer for your organization?
Yeah, that's a really great question. So our organization had traditionally a project management office, and some time ago we disbanded that project management office. And we moved people sort of into these technical PM roles with this idea of kind of moving into Agile work, but we were still supporting a lot of legacy applications and a lot of legacy architecture that was becoming harder and harder to maintain. So a couple of years ago, we started looking hard at what our systems were doing, and we started talking about a digital transformation. And when you start looking at that scope of work, you realize that you really have to update your way of working as well. And
Right.
so we looked at some different concepts for Agile, different Scrum and Safe, and we settled on adopting Discipline Agile and moving through that digital transformation. And kind of going over the different facets of that, and through that journey, we really realized that there was this other space there that was still really helpful to have PMPs in, which was really overseeing the value from what we were doing and delivering to our customer, making sure that was aligning with our organizational values, and then making sure that that was being delivered cleanly and with a lot of quality.
So what was it when you were looking at all of the options, right, from an Agile way of working perspective, that, comparing sort of like DA and Scrum and some of the other things that you looked at, what had you land on Discipline Agile?
There was the flexibility, right? So we wanted to see, I know a lot of people talk about hybrid Agile and things like that, but we really wanted a framework that we could work within, but that gave us the ability to adapt that to what our organization was doing, because we knew that when we started off on our digital transformation, we were going to make some missteps and that we were going to learn along the way. And we really needed a system that was going to grow with us, not something that was going to be too prescriptive or things that were going to require us to follow certain cadences or certain practices just for the sake of doing those. So we have a lot of really great talent on our team, and we knew we wanted to kind of grow that talent, but be able to, we wanted to be able to give them the tools too, right, to choose their way of working and to make sure that what we were doing was ultimately delivering that customer value and making it a good place to work.
So, yeah, pretty common situation, right? Where you're seeing that you're going to need to make some changes. Your changes are going to benefit from also changing your way of working. Sounds like you started off with sort of a team-based approach, right? Let's figure out how we're going to be able to maybe improve the efficiency in what the teams are doing.
Yeah.
But I know that some next things kind of came along, right?
Yes. Yeah, we definitely, like I said, there was a journey for sure, and we learned a lot of things along the way, and some of those are that, well, we actually kind of knew going into it that a lot of the work in our organization is siloed. So we are a relatively, well, I guess I would say we're a nonprofit, but we have a relatively large number of departments, in my opinion. We probably have 10 or 12. And so each of the departments that we were working with, so we have these departments, and our IT is like a shared services. And so in each of these departments, they were consistently coming up with different ideas for things that they wanted, or these different projects or product ideas. And so they would come up with these ideas, and then they would come to IT and say, like, well, we've got this 90% done. Now we need you to finish it, that last 10%. And we were like, well, we have these other things that are going on. And so, we'll work with you to get that done, right? So there was this silo thinking in that regard, in terms of not looking across the organization and aligning resources, right? Thinking ahead and planning in an appropriate way. But then also within our teams, we tried out a couple of different ways. And so when we first started our Discipline Agile journey, we had 2 delivery teams that very much only worked on specific sets of code, or specific types of coding. And it was always sort of an interesting exercise when we would go to release something, because those teams had been working by themselves. And then we had these interdependencies that always came up at the wrong times. And so we would have to figure out what was a better way of handling those different scenarios, so that we wouldn't have last minute surprises in our release cycles.
Yeah, and one of the things that I think is really interesting about some of the work that you do at ASCO is, well, you do conferences and meetings, right? And you're, just so everybody out there understands, like their annual meeting, they would have like 50,000 people in attendance, like live in attendance, right? So I mean, these are like, you have some pretty significant dates that aren't going to move, right? We're not in a situation where we can iterate forever. You have things that have to get done at particular moments in time.
That's right. Yeah, we can't move a conference of that magnitude now. It's 5 days, 45 to 50,000 people. So, nowadays, some online and mostly in person. We have a lot of people coming back, but hard deadlines, work that has to get done, and you got to find a way to get it done.
Yeah. So how about some of the things that you started to, I think, realize, right? Like, how is the work I'm doing as a team member? How is the work we're doing as a team tying back to the vision, the mission, the strategy, the investment pillars that you have at the organization?
Yeah, we started hearing that the team didn't really understand what we were doing or why, right? Like everyone kind of understands the concept of the digital transformation for the sake of updating your architecture or having user-friendly applications. But there wasn't a sense of, well, how does that really align to what our organization is doing? There wasn't any line of sight to those, to our mission or to our vision, which was really to cure cancer and to increase education and quality for patients. And so we wanted to make that more clear for people, making sure that they understand this is why you're doing that work, right? I remember there's a thing of like, what would it look like if everyone in the organization knew why, down to the developer, right? When they get this task, how would it be if they understood the why behind the ask? And so we really started trying to put that into play through visual information, making sure they understood, like, hey, here's the flow, and this is why we're doing this work. And then, hey, let's keep the customer in mind. This is about customer value. And so without that ability to see how the work was tied into the vision, mission, and strategy, it was really kind of a never-ending litany of these things to do. And even when we were doing largely project-based work, it was similar, right? We would just have this line of stakeholders who were coming to us and saying, my project's next, and my project's next. And so we had to start saying, well, we're going to decide who's next based on how close you are to our vision, mission, and strategy.
Yeah. So as a project professional, right? Or I should say, as project professionals, a lot of times it's like, we've got to get this released, right? We do have a date, we do have a certain quantity of work. So gold star to the development teams, right? Or platinum star, hey, we made our release.
Yeah.
But then the question is, what do you mean there's no customer value?
That's a great question. So often, again, as our departments were working in these different silos and coming up with these ideas and not really having a collective vision of what the organization's mission is, we would just get all of these different requests. And now we call it the product death cycle, right? It's like, if you build it, they will come, right? Instead of saying, well, let's ask them what they want and then build that and see if it works. And so it was a lot of just, well, go do this thing or go do that thing. And it felt like busy work, right? there wasn't the sense that I know that if I implement this, I'm going to be satisfying our mission and our vision, and I know I'm going to be delivering customer value. It was just like, oh, well, I have another ticket and I'll go do that.
Yeah, and speaking of tickets, now, I mean, some organizations struggle with, right? They've got this large scope of work that's going to take them 6 months, 12 months, more than 12 months, right? So they have
Yeah.
all this kind of entangled disparate functionality that's sort of grouped together in these big projects. Now,
Yep.
some of the other things I think that we see are this, a slow, painful death by 1,000 tickets. It's like
Right.
all these little tickets that keep coming through at the cost of doing something that is a more valuable increment of value to your members.
Yeah. And I think we'll get into that in a bit, possibly around building by MVP or MBI. But in a lot of ways, we started out with this idea when we were doing project work, and everyone was still trying to get this work in. They would call it maintenance, and it would be, oh, we need to do this to keep the lights on. We have a million maintenance requests, and I just need you to do this one little thing. And like, oh, hey, back channel, can you just slide this report in for me, and things like that. And so it was just like there was a constant sense of constant distraction, and so it was just ticket after ticket with no clear purpose or understanding of why. The sense that the work was, maybe beneficial to the customer, but we're not really sure why. And now, even though we're this is another place that actually we're working on in our Agile adoption, is that we've gotten to that point where we're starting to break work down to a really small degree, which is great, but now it's also overwhelming. And so over the next few months, what I'm hoping to be working with the team on is stepping back a little bit and looking at things from an MBI level and saying, what's that minimum business increment that we need to deliver a specific value to customers, and say, how do we design our team around that work, right? Let's make the team around the work and not make the work around the team.
Yeah. And so from the teams that you have, and you've got both, teams that have, ASCO employees and you've got some vendors, right? One of the roles that is often a more than one role, the roles, product ownership and product management, right? Where somebody is starting to attend to looking at that next increment of value, and then looking at, okay, so if we're working on something, and then we do have, sort of like you said, back channeling, we've got, an
Right.
additional ticket that's being requested, right? That's an impact, because there's a cost of interrupting, and even if it's little, right, the
Yeah.
death by 1,000 tickets. So what are some of the things that you've seen an improvement in, and maybe where you still want to be able to get to?
From the perspective of product owners, or just in our ticket take, or both?
Product owner, both, but product owners first, or product ownership.
Yeah. So, and after we disbanded our project management office, a lot of our PMs I mentioned before kind of went into a little bit different roles, where they were maybe technical PMs in a specific subject area, or working with specific departments. And so as we started to do our discipline Agile adoption, we really needed to bring online product owners to help in a lot of ways, the way that they were working, but in a different kind of sense. And so we did training, and we meet with them, and we talk about, like, they're on the delivery teams, and so they're with the groups as we're going through our daily coordination meetings and things like that. But really still working with them in terms of understanding what the role of a product owner really is. So grooming a backlog, making sure tickets are correctly defined in the right size, making sure that we have a clear picture from the business stakeholders that they're working with. And so those are some of the big challenges that I think that we're looking to improve over the next year, and making sure that we're really solid in that space, so that so many of these things are interconnected, right? We want to have strong product owners so that the teams are really well well organized, and they feel confident in the work that they're doing, and they understand why they're doing it.
Yeah. Tom Gilb, who's probably the most experienced Agilist in the world today. I mean, he goes back to, I think, I don't know, late 60s, early 70s.
Yeah.
One of the things that he has said in a number of his writings, and talked in conferences and so forth, is that requirements is still one of the biggest challenges, because if you don't get the communication correctly, not just the written requirements, right, not some big stack of a specification, but understanding of a requirement, and having an adequate amount of both conversation and the written part of it, is such a problem. So what are some of the things that you are still seeing in the organization where maybe a definition of ready isn't being attended to or respected?
Yeah, for sure. We see a lot of different things as the team is becoming more mature. So we have a lot of delays in, I won't say a lot. We still have delays in our workflow. We have handbacks and we have handoffs, right? So a developer will groom a ticket and will think that we have all of the necessary information in the ticket. But then once a developer starts working on it, there are additional questions. And so there's a delay, right? They have to call in the product owner or they have to do some additional spike research on whatever it is, the system that they're working in. And then that compounds, right? So the more people we have to bring back into the equation, the more time that it's going to take. And so that's at least one of the challenges that we see. So then also sometimes things are not, the product owner will be delayed in accepting the work. And so that creates an additional delay. We know that we need them there to help when that work is ready, right? To finish the work and get it out to our customers. And then sometimes with the definition of done. So maybe they didn't, I don't know. It just feels like sometimes maybe they skip. Not in the testing. I feel like we're pretty good with the testing, but there are just other clauses in in our agreement of our definition of done that we'll get to the end and we'll say this was released, but the product owner didn't accept it, or not all of the test cases were tested for, or something like that, right? There's just some of those little nuances that we still need to tweak.
Yeah. So leading into then, why did you embrace Agile?
Right. Well, we largely because we wanted to increase feedback. We wanted to make sure that if we're talking about customer value and having an outside-in mindset, that we're really following that up with understanding that we've asked customers, we've delivered what we think they want, and then we're validating that again and making sure that that's accurate. So we want to have quick feedback. We also wanted high quality. So with Agile, we were able to break up our development cycles and bring quality closer to the right, to the left. Actually, they call it shift left. And so what we're trying to do is making sure that our quality assurance team is there at every step, and that they're working more closely with our development teams to understand the work and to execute the test cases that they need to. And part of breaking up those development cycles and bringing in those smaller packages again is that we carried less risk. So as we're developing these smaller groups of things, we understand that there's not as much work in process at one time, so we're able to manage that amount of work. We know that we're going to get feedback from our business stakeholders and from our customers faster, so we can build on that. As opposed to in a typical waterfall, maybe we don't deliver anything until the end, and then we have to go 50 steps back to fix one thing, right? Or that quality testing is so much later in the process that it incurs a much higher risk. And we've just found it's more manageable to bring those things into smaller bits. And so we had a lot of different reasons for why we really wanted to move into an Agile space, and not just because everyone else was.
Right. Which is unfortunately so often the thing. It's like, well, I don't know, everyone else is, our leadership thinks we're behind. Let's be Agile, right?
We'll go fast.
Yeah. We'll go fast.
Actually, going fast wasn't really one of our biggest reasons. It was really more about having that speed of feedback and having a more reliable quality in what we were delivering.
Okay, so guys, we're realizing you're going to go through digital transformation. Realize that to do that and to be more efficient, and a lot of times, you're going through that type of sort of change. It's a good time to also bring in a new way of working, right? Because there is just a lot of energy, and it just sometimes it's just easier to kind of get things going.
Right.
So made improvements at the team level, right? A lot of great experiences and how you embraced Agile, starting to get really good feedback between, the team members, between the, product owners, product managers, your business stakeholders, and ultimately your members. So now how about taking a look at sort of a day in the life, right? So again, for everybody out there that's watching this either live or on recording. So Krystal being a project professional and really moving from a mostly traditional waterfall sort of approach and having solid project management skills and moving now through a digital transformation and an agile adoption into really looking at how you've understood the value streams that exist within ASCO and some of the ways that you're going to be able to make improvements.
Yep. So this is great. I started with waterfall type projects. And so, like I said, we're a relatively small IT shop and we were working with all of our departments. And so they would just line up. We have this project, we have this project, we have this project. And we we didn't have a great line of sight to that vision, and it was always about bringing as much scope as they could because they knew that once their project had ended, they were going to get back in line for the next one. And so there was always all of this scope creep that was being added on. And we would have these big project charters, and we tried a couple of different times to bring in different kinds of intake process where we would have them meet with someone and maybe understand the request and then maybe try and schedule that and to robot, but that never really happened because, as you guys know, life happens and there are always regulatory things that happen or technology changes or your membership changes. And so we were constantly being reactive instead of proactive. And we really needed to think differently about how that was happening. And so so then we would there was always a phase 2, right? So there was always like this idea that you said, well, now you brought all this scope and you had a deadline and you made it to the deadline, but you didn't get the scope that you asked for. We'll do a phase 2. So then you get back in line and then you would just double that again the next time you got your chance or whatever. And we really tried. I mean, ASCO is a really wonderful place to work. And we really tried to make as many of those things happen as we could. Right. But again, we were just limited resources with a lot of competing demands, and we had to do a lot of different things. And so one of the best changes that we've made is being able to build in small increments and orienting the business thinking around MVPs or MBIs. And so saying, we're not going to give you a phase 2. What we're going to do is make sure you get a solid MVP, something that is going to get your product out to the customer or get that value out to the customers. We're going to make sure that that's quality work, that it's going to be delivered in a timely fashion. And then we're going to build on that. We're going to talk to the customers. We're going to make sure that the additional features that we want to add on are going to be valuable. And then we're going to build those for you. So we're able to start taking that MVP, that initial one, and then create an MBI for an additional set of feature. At least that's where I want to go. So then we have this additional, once we get past 1,000 tickets, we'll have, then you can have those additional features as MBIs and again, organize your team around that work. And then you're continuing to iterate, right? So it goes back to those small increments and that quick feedback cycle. Here's a chunk, here's a chunk, here's a chunk. And then we're more able to service more people at a time because we're not spending 12 to 18 months at a time on a single project, or really 2 or 3 projects at a time based on the number of team members that we had. So it really makes it a lot more manageable that way. So that's one of the big things between before and after. And also now what we've seen kind of as we've gone through this process, and we've touched on a couple of times already today, is that there's still this space. So we are used to, as project managers, we already have a ton of great skills, right? We're already great at resource management, at budgeting our time and our money. We're already great with scope management. And so there are places in our Agile adoption where we had thought that maybe that work would be done by product owners or maybe somebody else in the space. And whether they're just not there yet or we need some additional people, really what we found is that project managers are really well suited for that area. And that's taking a look across and saying, do we have a better intake process? Are we building in those small increments? Do we have the right teams aligned to the right work? And so it's just going through some of those additional things and seeing how I've been able to maybe not transition as much as evolve into a value stream place with the work, right? It doesn't feel like I've changed jobs any. I'm still using the same skills that I learned as a project manager. I'm just using them in a bigger scale.
Yeah, I think that's where we're going to see hopefully in the future, like the value delivery professional, right? The value delivery focus, where it is a lot less of some of the focus that we've had and resource utilization, high levels of resource utilization versus really trying to take a look at what's the smallest thing that we can be doing that'll have an impact for our customers, or again, keep us in compliance, or do something of value for us. And then and again, the next thing and the next thing.
Right.
How about the level of work in progress?
Yeah, these are all, I feel like these are also applicable to what we do. And so previously we would have, in our waterfall projects, we would have all of this scope going at one time, right? So people want to have as much work done as they possibly can. Let's try and get as much of that done as they can. Oh, wait, this is a priority. No, just kidding. That's the priority. Let's change gears and do that thing instead. And so we have a lot of work going at one time. And when we reduce the amount of work in process, it really does a lot of amazing things. I've really learned over the last 2 years that multitasking is a lie. That when we multitask, we really waste time, because no one is truly efficient at doing 15 things at once. Now, maybe if you're a parent, you are, or maybe if you are a coach of a soccer team, you are, right? You're really great at coordinating a lot of different things happening at one time. But really at work in the tech space, what we find is that having too much work in process really means context switching, which takes time, more confusion maybe about what the work is going. Maybe you're taking shortcuts because you're trying to get it all done.
Right.
And we also have more fire drills around the work. So I got a back channel request to go work on this other thing over here because this is now all of a sudden a priority. And then this other stakeholder is like, whoa, wait a second. What happened to my work? Right? Where is that work? Why are we not finishing that work? And so we find that focusing on more finite sets of work frees the team up to really dedicate themselves to that effort, and prevents a lot of the chaos that comes with having this great big ball of scope happening at one time. And they are able to get that work done with, what we wanted was more quality, right? So the quality is there because they're able to take their time and focus on it. And there's less chaos because we don't have competing stakeholders always constantly, hey, where's mine? Oh, hey, where's mine? You're working on 3 projects at a time. What's going on? So it really is it's about peace, I guess, and stop starting work and to start finishing work. So I tell my team this all the time: just finish the work before you pick up another task. Just look to see if there's something else that you can help with and finish that out first. Let's reduce the amount of work that we're starting. And if you find yourself unable to do that, then let's talk about that as a team and understand why that is. Is there bad code? Is there a bad ticket? Why are we starting something else?
Yeah, the level of work in progress is still somewhat amazing in some cases at organizations, and we're getting pretty close to the end of the calendar year if you have a 12/31 year end, and we'll get into the January February timeframe, and there's new budget available, and it'll be like all these projects get started, right? How many times I've been in organizations and you get a leadership team member that's like proud that we've got 100 projects kicked off.
Yep.
Hey,
Someone once told me
have you delivered yet, right? Right? It's no. As long as they're started at some point, somebody is going to get something. Now, these principles are these specific principles, right? The ones that we're looking at here from a flow management lens. I mean, they all have a sort of a reciprocal sort of relationship with each other, right? So how about how there were delays in the workflow and things that you've been able to at least either reduce those delays, or you now have insight into some of them that are actively being worked?
Right. So this goes, they are all reciprocal or interconnected. So having skills as a project manager, like I said before, you're already used to kind of seeing the progress of scope, the progress of a project. And so moving that into a value stream sense where you're kind of looking across multiple sets of work, or a portfolio sense where you're looking across those multiple sets, you're still using the same skills. So you can see that flow of delivery and understand, oh, hey, I have an impediment here. I have a product owner who is consistently under grooming tickets. And so every time the team takes up their work, we have to spend more time on that because there are more questions than there should be, right? Should they have had a design session or something like that prior to introducing that work? Or we have dependencies between teams, right? So you can see, I just feel like there's something inherent to our soft skills that lets us see these kinds of challenges more easily than maybe some other people will. And it consistently amazes me because to me, they're like thorns that just stick out everywhere. But I understand that so not everybody sees them. So dependencies between teams that have different ways of working, right? So maybe we have, like my earlier example, where we have two teams who are maybe working on different sets of code. We know we need to have an integration point before they release. So that's going to save us time getting to the end and saying, oh, surprise, you guys have dependencies. So making sure that we're managing those kinds of delays that can cost us dearly in the end.
So, all right. So building in small increments, and then we looked at some of the you had levels of work in progress and some delays. Now, what about tying some of this together? The situation you talked about with back channeling, right? So you have a
Yeah.
request, you have a new fire drill, right? And that's going to interrupt, team A's, the A team, A team's right work, right?
Right.
But what about where that work also has a dependency somebody's waiting on? So now there's a
Right.
delay, right? And that's a cascading problem where they might have work that now also has a dependency or somebody's waiting on it, or they can't integrate as frequently as they thought.
That's true. So those things do have a cascading effect. And so when you have the example that you used is great. So you have a website that you are updating and you have a delay with your content team, but the content team has a delay with the copywriter. And so like all of these things, now the team is sitting still waiting for that work because there are other delays in that flow. So as a project manager, you can kind of look across that and say, oh, hey, maybe I need to see if there's some other work that my team can be working on right now while we're waiting on this copywriter. Or maybe it's a resource issue and we need to get somebody else in that space so that we can move this along. Or maybe we need to increase those resources so that we can start getting that output where we need it. And so I think all of those things can contribute to reducing those delays and ultimately getting us where we want, which is quality customer value being delivered as quickly as possible.
Yeah, and so you started the discussion off with having a bit of like, hey, we had some siloed perspectives, or a bit of just a siloed focus, right? And oftentimes that's the case, right? Even if you've got somebody that's moved into a product owner role, they're understanding how they're part of the Agile team, but they don't always have either the capacity or the experience because they're growing into that to be looking at one or two or three levels higher, to be looking at things like dependencies and, and from an economic standpoint, just the holding cost of functionality versus being able to release it, or the cost of releasing functionality, right? And again,
Right.
that is where the project professionals really, I think, are strongly suited for doing.
It is for sure. And
Working.
especially if you're somebody who's new to an organization, you can have a ton of experience, but it's going to take you some time to get to know that space. And so again, I feel like it's easier for project managers because we already have experience doing that.
Yeah.
I think
So how about making the work visible, right? Having a workflow that's
yeah.
visible and then the work inside of it.
Yep. So this is another thing that when we think of our product owners or our product managers, they're really focused on that specific thing. And I wish that we were an organization that had the luxury of only having one thing, but we're not. We have hundreds of things. And so because we are ultimately, we want to make sure that we are giving the most benefit we can to our members. And so we have 100 things. And so if a product manager or a product owner is focused down and they're thinking about their thing, then who's thinking of the bigger picture, right? Who's making sure that across the organization that work is understood and is visible? Or if you're someone who is waiting in line for your turn, when it's going to be your turn. So again, being so adept at managing schedules, I feel like project professionals are able to see across that area and say, let's make sure this is visible. Let's look and see what these teams are doing. Let's make sure the organization is aware of this information. Let's talk about the impacts to future work or to past work, right? Let's understand these are the things that we're doing right now. This is the work that we can do later, making sure that that communication layer is there. Because you can create a different kind of silo, right? If you have 10 products and 10 product teams and no one's really communicating up about what's happening in those teams, then you have a similar or same problem.
Yeah, and I think also when you've got a good visual representation of the work, it's a different conversation you can have, right?
Right.
You can say, this is what's going to happen if you want to bring that into the workflow. You want people to start working on that, then something else isn't going to get done, something else is going to wait. These are some of the ramifications for that. Do you still really need to have that brought in right now?
Right.
Right. That's yeah,
Yeah, and
it
you'd be
definitely
surprised at the answers you get. And my answer is usually, how close is it to the organizational mission? How much customer value does it bring? Right.
yeah.
These are my two biggest weighing factors of understanding. If we're gonna talk about how to sequence this work, if we're gonna talk about making sure that we understand what's coming in and the impact to everything else we already have going on, then let's make sure we're being thoughtful about it and doing that in a way that moves the organization as a whole forward, not just a specific thing.
Yeah, yeah. So it's not, necessarily focusing on, sometimes like, no, no. It's more of a, hey, here's why we may or
Mhm.
may not want to do that. And
Yeah,
hopefully then people are reasonable and they come to the, okay, I guess I can wait. Or I
right.
guess it's, not that
Yeah, and
important.
that's the other thing too, right? If you or someone, maybe you have some maintenance tasks that need to be done, but they're not a high priority, they're not bug fixes or something like that, then understanding why all of our resources are being dedicated to this other area will help you understand why it's going to take longer than you might have expected to get that done. Or another project or another MVP or another MBI. The same thing, right? Everyone just kind of wants to understand, or I think everyone wants a bigger understanding of the big picture than they maybe even realize.
Yeah.
Because when you have more information, you're able to make more educated decisions at the time about what you're doing, right? So maybe you look for something that has more customer value, or maybe you can make a better case about why there's customer value. So all of those things really matter at the end of the day.
Yeah, they do. So the last thing I want to ask you about is, over the past, I don't know, 10, 15, 20 years, whatever, right? There's been a lot of like, oh, there's no project managers in Agile, or, oh, we do this framework and there's absolutely no role for that. So, and
Right.
again, PMOs being disbanded and project professionals, right? Little concerned sometimes. I mean, we do a lot of, intro and basic sort of DA training. And sometimes we get, again, project managers, and they're like, hey, what am I going to do? I still have a lot of years left in my career.
Right.
So so again, you as somebody who is a PMP, right? You've
Yep.
got a lot of experience in both traditional project management and now also with agile ways of working and good understanding of value stream management. Where do you think PMPs really shine, and what are some of the things that for anybody out there that's in that kind of wondering what am I going to do state, like, where do
Right.
you think they can go?
Yeah, spoiler alert, we've been talking a little bit about them, right? So I think that there's a real opportunity for project management professionals in this space, because every organization has its challenges and every organization has its spaces where bodies are needed. And we have the training and we have the skills and we have the focus to really be able to pick up some of these loose ends and tie them together in a really nice way. So maybe in your organization, you already have someone who's dedicated to understanding the value, but do you have someone who is making sure that what the teams are working on is radiated so that everyone understands kind of what's going on? Maybe you have someone who is already working with your teams to remove impediments, but do you have someone who's making sure that business owners understand what the purpose of an MVP or an MBI is? And so being able to bring that attention to the overall value and delivery to improve the systems that our teams are working in, I think is a tremendous opportunity. And I really think that PMPs have the skills to fill that space. And if you're someone whose organization is moving in Agile, or you want to explore that space and you're really not sure, give it a try, because it's really exciting and there's only room to grow.
Awesome. Okay, so if for anybody that is on the live stream right now, any questions for Krystal? Anything
I'm happy to
from
answer questions.
Yeah, from maybe how they embarked on sort of their agile journey to where things are now, and anything you might be currently struggling with that maybe she can give you some insight into. And oftentimes on these live streams, right, people are a little either shy or, they'll wait. And if that's the case, afterwards, you can also post any questions on LinkedIn, and we'll both kind of monitor anything that comes up, and, answer asynchronously as well.
Of course.
All right, I'm not seeing anything coming through. So with that, Krystal, I'll say thanks so much for sharing your experience. Anybody that is going to PMI's Global Summit, I would encourage you to come and see Krystal speak on this topic live. If you're not going to Global Summit, but you're thinking about it, this would be a good reason to go.
Yes.
And Krystal, any parting words of wisdom you would like to share with everyone?
I guess a couple. One, stop starting work and start finishing work. It makes a big difference. It really does. And also be curious. Don't be afraid to explore those spaces or ask those questions in your organization. You just never know what you might find. It's been a wonderful opportunity for me, and I really appreciate you having me on here today, Joshua, to be able to talk to everyone about this.
And as we are doing our wrap up, we actually do have some questions that are coming in. Yeah. Okay. So first one, right? The title speaks about PMP and value stream management. And the question is, how did they connect?
It's taking that traditional view of a project management professional as someone who shepherds waterfall type projects, and understanding that there's so much more to the picture than just completing a project. Someone once told me that just because your project finishes doesn't mean it was successful. And so you have, did you achieve customer value? Did you achieve quality? Did you move your organization forward in a positive way that's going to make an impact? And these are the things that we should use to weigh those kinds of decisions. And so for me, being a PMP in a value management space is really about understanding, did we meet those markers more than did we finish the work?
Excellent. All right. Next question is, how did you get your stakeholders to adopt DA?
Brute force. No, we went to them with a case, and we said, this is how we've been working, and these are our results that we've gotten from working this way, right? These are the frustrations that we've had, and these are the successes that we've had. And here's what we're proposing, and here's what I think we can gain. And I think that they were skeptical at first, but I think that when they realized that we were able to deliver the promises that DA has, being able to be flexible in our way of working, being able to manage our risk more adeptly, being able to build those packages more quickly, they bought in, and they understood that, yeah, this is really, at least we can say what it is that we're doing, instead of just saying, oh, well, we kind of have, sometimes it's waterfall agile and sometimes it's waterfall and whatever, but really it was about bringing that case and then showing them the results of it.
So how long has this journey been, right? So this hasn't been just like 2 or 3 months, right? I mean, it's probably been a little bit longer.
2.5 years.
2.5 years, yeah. So, I mean, that's a fair amount of time, right, to be looking at results and looking at outcomes, right? So you have some objectives you're looking to achieve, and then you've got outcomes that, again, over a good span of time. So that's a fair amount of experience.
It's true. But like I said before, it's a learning experience, right? It's an iterative experience. And so we started with those arguments for, and we started showing them those results. And then we started building on that and saying, we see these challenges, we can fix those challenges, right? Or we can improve those challenges, or we can replace those challenges with other things. And so and when I say 2.5 years, I don't want to scare anyone. It's just that you don't expect it to happen overnight either, right? Because every organization is different, and depending on how many people you're working with, or the maturity of your teams, how long they've been working together, it can be really different. But for us, it feels like a month, but it's been longer. Yeah.
All right. And what was the battle you thought you would have to fight, but you didn't?
I really thought that we would have to battle the mindset shift for MVPs, because people were so, and even now there's still, we had an adoption group. I don't know if this is silly. We had an adoption group kind of make the rounds and say, we've gone through this process and here's what you can expect for the other people that we were going to be working with, because we were really afraid that people were going to have a really hard time letting go of that big scope promise. This is my project and I'm finally going to get all of my work done that I wanted to get done. By showing them that we can do more things in the course of a year by making those smaller and more impactful, we were able to change that mindset. So it's actually been much more successful than I had initially hoped for, which has been great.
Yeah, that's fantastic. All right, I think from the looks of it, those are all the questions we've got.
Great.
So yeah, once again, thanks a lot, Krystal. Thank you, everyone out there that is watching this live and providing comments or just chiming in to say hello. And we'll see you on the next episode of All Things Discipline Agile.
Have a nice day.